Hello everybody. We are shortly before starting the webinar with Casey Berkridge from Australia. This is Rainer Wendt speaking.
Now it should be the right one. Okay, this time I think I figured it out.
No problem.
I do apologise. Every interface has a different option. So here we go. So I'm going to be talking about one of the things I'm really passionate about, which is stakeholder engagement. As a business analyst, if we can't engage our stakeholders well, if we can't work with them to understand their needs and all the other important information that us BAs elicit as part of any project or initiative, we're going to have failed projects. We're going to have unsuccessful business analysis activities, which of course are the main reason why projects might fail. So when I went and looked at stakeholder engagement, I did a little bit of research trying to find out what various texts and various bodies define stakeholder engagement as. And I was really quite shocked to see that the BABOK, our own business analysis body of knowledge, doesn't have a lot in it regarding the topic. It talks about the importance and it talks about some tools, but I didn't find a concise definition. So you can see I've grabbed a definition from our good friends at Wikipedia, and you can see the definition that they've described. Stakeholder engagement is the process which an organisation involves people who may be affected by its decisions or can influence the implementation of its decisions. And I just thought a little bit about this. And the first thing it talks about is that it talks about it being a process. And I thought to myself, well, what is a process? And I thought, it's not really a step-by-step, we do this, then we do this, then we do this. There's not really a set step 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in stakeholder engagement. It really is an ongoing activity that we need to do a number of things, but it's not a set process per se. So I thought, not sure that we need to think more about than it being just a process. And then I went on to look at the next line that says an organisation involves people who may be affected. And I thought, involvement, that's a very interesting word. And I thought, we don't just involve them, it's imperative that we get their support, we get their buy-in. We want to make sure we create these relationships. So it's not just an involvement situation, but we have that full wanting to be part of this initiative that we're working on. So I thought, some of the definitions, I'd love to look for better versions. But this also expanded my curiosity. I said, well, if this is just looking at the definition of stakeholder engagement, well, what do we really mean by it, and what can we do to ensure that we do it well? So as a starting point, I know that there's a few of you on there. I'd love to hear from you. You have the opportunity to use the chat feature of this webinar. So you should be able to open the chat bar, which has a chat. You can down arrow and open it, and you can enter your text and ideas there. So what are the common challenges that you've seen and experienced in stakeholder engagement? I'd love to hear from you what those common problems might be. I'll keep an eye on the chat box and read them out. So just a minute, if anyone would like to share, what are the common challenges with stakeholder engagement? Stakeholder is not interested. That happens so frequently. They don't know why they've been contacted, they don't know why you're talking to them, and they're not really interested. Perhaps they've got not much time. Some of the other challenges that many of us experience is that they're unwilling to share their information. Perhaps they don't know the purpose of the work that we're doing, or they don't know us, we don't know them, and there is no connection there. There's also lack of time, lots of stress. With us being online, we might not have the best method to connect, so it can be quite a challenge. So there are many reasons why stakeholders might not want to engage with them, so we need to think about how do we build good relationships with them. There are many, many great ideas from people, thought leaders, and even in the BABOK, as well as from many different articles and my own personal experience about some great principles we must keep in mind when we're thinking about great stakeholder engagement. In no particular order, I've listed a couple on the screen. Importantly, and the very first part of the business analysis body of knowledge that talks about business analysis planning is really about how do we plan for stakeholder engagement. So we must be prepared that we understand who they are, identify them, and do that analysis. So it's absolutely critical. Some other principles include ensuring that we engage them early and frequently through our work. We don't want to engage them halfway down the project and they wonder why they weren't there from the beginning. We need to think about the WIFM, the what's in it for me. So we need to think about what's in it for them. Why do they want to engage? Why do they want to be part of this project? What's the benefits they might obtain? We have to give them ownership in terms of how the engagement might run so we can best fit in with them. We need to consider how we're communicating, that we're communicating at the same level as they are, the right language, the right level of the technical or lay terms, the right jargon. Going further, we must recognise and acknowledge the part that they're playing in the project. What experience do they have? What knowledge are they contributing? And acknowledge that they have their busy day and lots of stresses as well. So we must make them feel heard and recognised for them and what they're bringing to the table. Keeping our list going, when we think of how we engage with them, if we're holding things back and if we're very clearly not being open and transparent, they will realise, and that can cause them to not trust us. So we must be thinking about how can we be open and transparent about what we're doing so we can build that trust. We must remain flexible to fit in with them, present a clear purpose of the work that we're doing, the outcomes the project is seeking to achieve, and what we're hoping to get from this engagement. So we can build a relationship, not just involve them like the previous definition said. It's about building that human-to-human connection. So we've got to think about how we build trust and rapport, that relationship, that real understanding of each other, as well as the last point. We've got to really listen and remain present for our stakeholders. They know if we're ignoring them. They know if we're not paying attention. So we must make sure that these are key elements that we're analysing to ensure that we are, in fact, acting in line with these key stakeholder engagement principles. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure that you can think of a few other principles that you believe are important in stakeholder engagement. If there are any, please feel free to share as we go through our webinar, because I'm always fascinated to learn what you do and what tips and tricks you can share. I'm also looking at our good friend the BABOK, as well as other tools, to find out what tools and techniques are available to us to build stakeholder engagement. And I've found a very, very limited couple. The first one is our good old friend, the RACI chart. We plot our stakeholders along the columns. We talk about our tasks and activities and elements in our rows. And in the intersection between our stakeholder and the task, we determine whether they're responsible, accountable, contributes, or informed about various information. Now, this is one of my absolute go-to tools. It really helps me understand who to involve in what elements of my project and my requirements, what workshops they should or should not be there. And it is a wonderful way for everyone to understand a little bit more about roles and responsibilities in a project. But does it help build stakeholder engagement? Well, it helps me plan a little bit, but it's not really an engagement tool per se, but definitely a great tool for us to keep in our tool belt. The next tool is our good old friend, the power interest matrix, or the Mendeley matrix. So it's a fun, an important tool again. We understand how much influence a stakeholder has in terms of decision making and power, and we analyse that on the vertical scale. On the horizontal scale, we understand how much vested interest or impact or effect they're going to be impacted by the work that we're doing in our project, and we plot that on the horizontal. And depending on where they land in these four key quadrants, that can help point us into the best way to try to approach that stakeholder, keeping them satisfied, keeping them close, keeping them informed. Great tool again. Does it help me engage my stakeholder? It helps me plan and analyse, but it still needs more. And one of the tools from the BABOK, in fact all of these are mentioned in the BABOK, is the onion diagram. So we analyse our stakeholders in terms of who's closest to us, in terms of the project team that we are working with, the directly impacted internal stakeholders, organisational stakeholders that work with them, and then external. A great tool for me to identify and classify my stakeholders, but in terms of creating engagement, I don't think it quite really gives us that real engagement. So all three tools are really good. I use all of them frequently, but when I plan my stakeholder engagement, we need more than just what's going to be the outcome of doing this analysis and going through and using these tools with our stakeholders. I'm very passionate about the idea of remaining very mindful in stakeholder engagement. So mindfulness is, for me, one of the key tools I've used over the years about how I can use that to ensure good, effective stakeholder engagement in terms of that relationship building. So mindfulness has a lot of different definitions depending on where you look, and they're all wonderful. I can't think of one single definition, so I talk about it in terms of some of the key elements around mindfulness. Mindfulness is really an analogy for an awareness. Often today you'll hear people say we must be mindful of the time, we must be mindful of the requirements, we must be mindful of so many different elements in our common language. What we're really saying when we're saying we must be mindful of the time is we must be aware of the time, or we must be cognizant of the time. We must pay attention to the time. So mindfulness is all about awareness. And when we're talking about awareness in terms of stakeholder engagement, we're aware of what's important to them, we're aware of what's happening in their life, we're aware of the conversation and the language that they use, we're aware of what's important to them. So we bring that awareness into our engagement so we can show and plan ourselves around making sure we're aware of what's going on for them, and we're aware of the impact our work and our language and our engagement is having on them. So there's that real paying attention to what's going on completely. Another aspect of mindfulness is the ability to notice something without jumping to conclusions and reacting. For example, if our stakeholder says something, instead of us just jumping in and blurting out things and reacting and perhaps getting angry or impatient or perhaps putting words into their mouth, we can notice what's just happened, what's been said, what's the intent, and we can pull back and react from a wiser position. So we can spend a pause between what's happening and our response to that reaction, so we can be more carefully considered in the way that we respond to our stakeholders. Should they say something perhaps rash or something illogical, we don't just jump onto it. We can notice and not react and choose a response from a more considered, wise position. In terms of stakeholder engagement, when we're talking and interviewing our stakeholders, we need to think about our attention. Is our mind wandering? Are we distracted? mindfulness helps us hone that attention and keep it on point so we're not being distracted by all the myriad of things that are around us. So mindfulness helps direct our attention to our stakeholder and detect if our mind's wandering, to snap our attention back to where it needs to be. So we can choose our attention. In fact, it's one of the most important resources each of us has. We can choose to direct our attention to anything, whether it's this webinar, the kids crying, the TV, the news report. We can choose where we direct it. It's completely within our control. So mindfulness is that concept of knowing where our attention is and then keeping it there where it needs to be. So we can detect if we're distracted and resist the distractions. And of course, in business analysis, one of the most important elements, I feel, from effective business analysis is curiosity. Remaining open and present to hearing more, to learning more, to discovering more, to questioning more, to uncovering more, to dig deep into that root cause of what's happening for our stakeholder and why might they be saying what they're saying about their reaction, their requirements or their problems. We want to stay open and present so we are able to think, what else is here? What else might be going on? So through the not reaction, paying attention and being open, we're better able to understand what's happening with our stakeholders and the project in itself. I often refer to mindfulness as it's a real carefulness, a carefulness of how we're watching our thoughts and the way that we're using our mind and those thoughts to ensure that we are remaining as present and attentive to our stakeholders so we can engage with them fully, human to human. Without this deliberate mindful aspect, we're going to be distracted, we're going to miss things, we may not dig deeper to the root cause and find ourselves missing requirements or implementing or suggesting solutions that don't offer the value that we really should. So I find it's the most important tool. Of course, mindfulness is a practice, and I'm not going to talk much more about that, but I will be talking more about that, of course, on the BA Day in Frankfurt in March next year. So with all being said, with my research into tools and techniques for engagement, with the definitions of stakeholder engagement, I found that nothing really satisfied what I wanted. And I just happened to be working with my team on a lean model business canvas. And I thought to myself, I wonder if there's a way I can repurpose this layout to think about how I can do stakeholder engagement using it. Of course, I've reorganized the various elements, but you can see it's laid out in a similar fashion to a typical lean canvas. But it's all about understanding our stakeholder. So this is the layout. The intent behind this canvas tool is for us to perhaps talk to our stakeholder about the various elements. We might brainstorm some of it, understand it, and it will help paint a complete picture of our stakeholder and the work we're doing to enable us to really plan and analyse and monitor our stakeholder engagement with a really full picture of everything we need to know to ensure effective stakeholder engagement. So let's look through these 9 elements. You can see at the very top, it's got our stakeholder name. So we say, which stakeholder are we referring to? And then we start by thinking all about them. Who are they? What's important for them? What's their role? What's their background? What's their attitude to work? What's happening in their world? What's their team like? What's their workload like? Who are they interacting with? What's their private life like? Are they going through a messy divorce? Have they just had a new baby? Who are they in the world? What's really going on for them? We might need to think about their experience, their background, all sorts of attitudes, perhaps dispositions, so we can really understand who they are and then fill in those notes as we go. So we really want to get up close and personal and understand who this wonderful human is that we're going to be working with. Then we start thinking about what's important to them and their needs. Now, we're not talking about a full-blown requirements list here. We're really understanding what does value look like from their point of view. What are their requirements? What issues do they have? What frustrates them? What delights them? And that last point, what do they need from me as we go through this engagement process, perhaps in a long project? So what are they needing from me in this engagement? How can I make sure that they are getting what they need from me and perhaps my team? Moving down, understanding what are their goals, long-term, short-term, intermediate term. What do they really want to achieve in this piece of work and perhaps in their life? What's valuable to them? How do they measure success and what are those metrics? What would be the impact if we don't hit their objectives? If we're creating a project and we miss what their key targets are, what's going to be the result for them? Importantly, we might talk to them about how we measure and monitor our progress, how we're going to show them that progress, and of course that what is in it for them. How do they benefit from the work that we're going to be doing in this particular piece of work? Importantly, we have to understand that this engagement is happening in an environment around us, the project environment, or whatever else it might be. It might be operational. It doesn't have to be a project. So we think about the nature of the work that we're doing together. Is it a short-term engagement? Is it a long-term engagement? What area of expertise are they bringing to the table? What kind of information are they likely to provide and share as part of the work we're doing together? We might also understand their decision-making authority, any previous history they have with this piece of work. Maybe we're implementing a new finance system enhancement and they've been working for years on finance. So we can understand their history in relation to the work that we're doing together and understanding how much change might be heading their way in terms of the scope of work. Then we start thinking really carefully, what are the activities we're going to do together? What meetings, workshops, interactions, phone calls, emails? What type of interactions? When and how frequently? How formal do they need to be? If I'm asking them to a workshop, why are they going to be there? What contribution do I want from them to come to these workshops with me? So what other discussions are we going to be having? What groups and other people might be involved? And that last one, we forget often. How much time do we expect to spend with this stakeholder? Because perhaps they've not got as much time as we need. So we're going to have to manage some expectations within ourselves and them to ensure that we have scheduled and planned for the right amount of time. Then the outcome. The outcome in this sense is not the outcome of the project, but it's the outcome of us working together. What do they need from me in terms of the results that they're expecting, the models, outputs, artifacts, reports, emails, text messages, phone calls? What do they need from me? How formal does it need to be? How are we going to keep them up to date? And how do we maintain that transparency so they know what's happening with the information they're providing and the work progressing along as we go? So what is the outcome of the engagement? This last section, last section in the top of the canvas is something where we need our mindfulness practice. We need to think about our own attitude and what am I bringing into this engagement. So what preconceived ideas and notions do I have? Maybe I worked with them last year and we had a wonderful time. Or maybe we had a lot of difficulties and clashed So we can sort of look at the history and say, what perceptions do I have about this person, true or not? Maybe my project manager has given me a false sense of, oh, you're going to love working with that person. You have so much in common. So straight away, we might have some expectations. So we need to look within our own self and say, what am I, what history, what influence do I have? What opinions do I have? True or false? Maybe I've worked with them in the past and I think, oh no, it's going to be like terrible. So we need to understand what the attitude is I might have towards them and what thoughts I might have towards them. By examining this very important section, we can start identifying maybe what we might be bringing to jeopardize our engagement. We can learn to drop some of these perceptions, drop some of these judgments, because they're going to get in the way, because before we even talk to them, suddenly we're thinking something about them which may or may not be true. In the past, what happened in the past is not what's happening now. So we need to come with that clear objectivity that business analysts must have, that neutrality, so we can be more aware and we can be more curious without jumping in. So from the top 7 elements, we should now be able to identify what risks might be getting in the way of successful stakeholder engagement. What problems could happen? What conflict could happen? Where could we miscommunicate, have misunderstandings? What could jeopardize our ability to engage with this stakeholder and build that real strong working relationship with them? What communication issues could happen? Anything that may impact our relationship negatively. So we can use all the analysis, including things like our Mendeley matrix, our racing matrix, and other tools. We can incorporate them into the canvas and now have a clear picture of what are the potential problems, because the last section then starts putting it together to say, right, now that I have all this great information, I should now be able to construct a clear plan and principles of engagement for this stakeholder. What tools, how am I going to communicate, what approach will I take? Importantly, how am I going to reduce and mitigate those engagement risks that we've just talked about? What preparations must I do, and how am I going to make sure I remain mindful and aware of the various elements that we've analysed in this engagement stakeholder engagement canvas. So when we look at it, it's a complete picture of the stakeholder, the project, objectives, us, and our way forward. And we can use this to review and reflect frequently as time goes on. We can do this stakeholder canvas for myself and one stakeholder. So we can do one stakeholder at a time with a canvas. But perhaps we're engaging with a group of stakeholders. Maybe we've got a user group meeting. Maybe we're going to be talking to a whole heap of people from the call centre. So we might do a general canvas of what I think about that whole group of stakeholders. And so when we're doing this analysis, we're looking at them as a group rather than as an individual, and coming to some broad common ground of what would the group look like. How I have used it, the very first time I used this canvas, I was working in an agile team, and we were using this canvas to analyse our stakeholder. So as a group, we were looking at our product owner and we were analysing the product owner and how to engage them as a group of people. So us as a group did analysis on one person. And for those people in data analysis, you're going to hate this last one. We could do it as a group of people analysing another group of people. So we can do a many-to-many, which I know in database land is a big no-no. But in stakeholder analysis, it's perfectly fine. So we can use this stakeholder analysis canvas in multiple ways. And it doesn't have to be this formal. Many people who are using it have reported to me, they just use it almost like a checklist to say, have I considered everything to plan my engagement thoroughly? and then we can review it after each meeting or after each workshop to see if things are changing, so we can update and continue to monitor and morph up engagement to suit what's happening in the actual real world. So as a last thought and a preview into my talk in Frankfurt in March next year, which I'm very excited about, mindfulness has many benefits to a BA. Some of them are there on the screen, and we're going to talk about them in a lot of detail in my workshop and a little bit in my talk. So we're going to talk about the various elements of business analysis and the benefits that mindfulness can give us through many of those key business analysis activities. I'm going to leave that as a taste test for you to come along in March and see me, and I hope to meet you all then. We have a bit of time now, Raina, if people want to ask any questions or make any comments. I'm really keen to hear any thoughts, suggestions or questions from you all. So please feel free to put your thoughts, questions in the chat, and I'll take as many questions as I can.
Yes, exactly. So there are two boxes. Actually, you can use the chat, or there's a questions window. I have both here on my screen, so feel free. And if you want to speak to us, give me a hand or give me a signal, then you can unmute your mic. No problem at all. Okay, so what I would like to ask is if stakeholders if they are, let's say, not really engaged, if they are half in the line organization, half in the project organization, and if they cannot see what is in for them, where they have their benefits, what they can earn. So is it a good idea to create individual value propositions for them, or are you more giving the advice to create value propositions for groups of people? Is this a question you can answer?
It's important to understand what's important to them, but it's hard sometimes, because we must manage expectations, because we're given perhaps scope that is beyond our control. It might have come from our sponsors and our organisations in line with strategic goals. So we must remain mindful that should we be understanding what's in it for them, we shouldn't be promising that we can definitely meet it, because what's important for them and their goals may not be doable in this project. So whilst the canvas helps us understand what's in it for them, we might need to seek, well, what can we offer, if anything, in terms of the project overall, and how may their goals align to the overall piece of work. But it also might be a great tool to sort of say, well, we need to manage expectations. It can be a tough job as a business analyst when you're meeting your stakeholders and they think you're going to deliver the world, but often we don't have the time and the budget to deliver everything they want. So this can be a great way to understand their expectations and what the reality is, so we can help manage them so they don't get disappointed when they don't get exactly what they need. But if we don't know what they need in the first place, if we don't figure out what's important to them, then we might be going on a lot of assumptions, and then we're in even more trouble because we've not even understood what would be important to them. But again, this can be a great insight that can lead us into questioning our scope and saying, well, hang on a minute, have you realised that there's these problems that may not have been understood prior to? So again, individually understanding each stakeholder and what's important to them is key, but we can't promise the world. As much as we always want to, we can't promise that they'll definitely hit it. So there is a balance there of understanding while not promising that we can definitely create and do everything they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for this answer. This helps a lot. So I have the experience that that some stakeholders over the time they lose interest. If at the beginning of a project they might be interested, they participate, and then if the initiative takes a longer time, let's say months, then sometimes you think, hey, what is about them? Are they sleeping? They are not participating anymore. So do you have a kind of regularly wake up or signal to ping them, or what are you doing to keep the engagement on a let's say minimum level?
That's right. That's really where, when we're looking at that outcome of the engagement, understanding how frequently we're going to work with them so we don't leave it so long. It might be it could be just a quick discussion that's very casual, but that transparency of, hey, this is where we're up to, this is what's happening, perhaps if there's some way we can share information, even though for them they're not seeing a lot, the project is going. So how do we maintain that transparency so we can report to them that, look, we haven't forgotten about you, things are happening in the background, and this is what is happening in the background, and perhaps be able to share with them, perhaps, I don't know if we've got screenshots, even though the work's not ready, or bring them into some, if we're working in an agile environment, maybe bring them along to some of our sprint reviews and demos. So how can we ensure that they know that even though they can't see anything exactly, we can still show them that things are not gone to sleep. So that can be part of our planning process of how do we maintain that regular contact so we don't feel like they've been forgotten.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's important that you give a signal that you haven't forgotten the stakeholders, that you are still maintaining the relationships. That's very important, I think. Perfect. So so I haven't seen other questions now. Please, if you have questions, now is the opportunity to talk to Casey directly, or if you want, you can, of course, come to Frankfurt, where Casey is speaking about mindful business analysis and about, let's say, how to realize things in a larger workshop, even next day, in a 4 hours workshop. I can't wait to meet you all after these Corona years again, live in Frankfurt. We expect people from many countries. So in 2019, I think we had 30 or 35 countries. It was amazing. So hopefully we can have a huge community again in March, that the people come to Germany, that they travel to Frankfurt. I hope everything should be fine again with traveling, because I can remember that, especially for Australia, it was a bit hard.
It was. We were locked out for a lot of times, but now with restrictions more or less back to normal, now just normal precautions are needed. I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I definitely will be sharing a lot of tips and tricks of how mindfulness and my own business analysis experience of how to question, how to remain curious, how to balance all the different roles that we have as a business analyst, because BAs, we're not just BAs, we're testers, we're product owners, project managers, we could be SMEs. So how do we keep the balance between all these competing priorities? So I'm really looking forward to being there and meeting all the other wonderful people. I wonder if we can get even more countries participating. It'd be great to meet so many. I'm always very excited to meet other fellow passionate BAs. Certainly there's a wonderful community that Raina and so many other BA chapters around the world are doing, and it's wonderful to be part of the BA community. I look forward to it.
Yes, yes, and we are going to have the chapters, especially the German chapter, of course, we will have a meeting with, but actually many of the European leaders of the chapters are expected to be there. So yeah, as I said, I can't wait. So I think we are coming to an end. A big thank you to Casey. So that was really interesting, and I like this canvas because it's everything is on one page, and that's the good thing, because you think about a person and then you take the person's sheet, and it's not that you have you don't need to have everything in your mind. You can just look at the sheet and you see, yeah, I know, okay, these are the sensitive points. This is why I have to approach him or her again, and things like that. Yeah, perfect. So there is a discount code in the mail which you receive after the webinar. You will get, all webinar participants will get 10% off for the BA day. So please check that this email is not going into your trash. So because this 10%, it's easily earned money. If you buy a ticket, you can have this discount. And I would like to announce another webinar, which will be which will happen soon. It's with Keith Ellis. Keith Ellis is the CGO of the IABA, and we will talk about Nimble. And this announcement will go out in a few days, together with the new newsletter we are preparing. And it will be in November somewhere. I think it will be the 20th of November, if I'm not wrong. You can find this on our webpage, and you can find this in the newsletter. Okay, Casey, again, many thanks for Australia. Greetings from Germany. We have, more or less noon now, and you are already in the evening. I wish you a nice evening, and thank you very much. And looking forward to seeing you in Frankfurt.
I am too. Thank you for having me. I hope everyone's enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you all in March. Thank you so much for having me, and good night. It is nearly bedtime for me. So enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Lovely to meet you all. Thank you again.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.